Yeah, this is episode 110 of Stand Up with Pete Dominick. I am very happy to have you joining me. Woo, what a night did we have last night? On Wednesday, the 20th, I welcomed Eric Siegel live, and we'll get that up next week for you. But thanks to all of the paying subscribers who joined me, 66, I think, in total. Great questions, great conversation. Special thanks to Eric Siegel. Now, let's get to today's show, where I'm joined by Dr. Christina Greer of Fordham University. And it's Backyard Politics with Bill B. in D.C. and the German Marshall Fund's Jonathan Katz. Coming up, let's roll, Tim. All right, we are off, and this is episode 110. I had a great conversation with Dr. Christina Greer of Fordham University about so many different things. She's a black woman, and I'm a white guy, and so I talked just about that conversation publicly. When we talk about our lived experiences, we start there and it went all over the place. So good. Such a great conversation coming up with Dr. Christina Greer. Then I invited my friends from D.C., Jonathan Katz and Bill Boyle to join me. I think I already said that at the top. Okay, so, every day you probably get different daily emails, right? Who do you subscribe to? What do you subscribe to? Every morning I get like 10 every morning, and then a few more in the afternoon, and even at night, kind of recaps of the day. I love them all. I don't read them all every day, but I got to give a shout out to Adam Parkamenko and his daily newsletter called Today's Big Stuff. The guy is so raw and brutal and insulting to Trump and the real fools who are buying his bullshit. And it's kind of satisfying because it's smartly done, in my opinion. It's called Today's Big Stuff, and I want to give it a shout out on today's podcast and read a little bit from it. Today's Big Stuff, May 20th, 2020. Good morning. There are 167 days until the presidential election. Trump threatens swing states with the Ukraine treatment. Mike Pompeo uses the State Department to fill up his wife's inbox, and Trump refuses to unveil President Obama's portrait at the White House. Hey, everybody. How the hell are you, he writes. What's that? You're struggling to make sense of how Americans could be so dumb as to put this deranged idiot in charge? Yeah, us too. But that's kind of an everyday thing around here. Truth be told, we're running out of ways to describe how bad it's getting. Dumpster fires can be extinguished, and shit shows presumably run out of encores at some point. But this nightmare just keeps going and getting worse by the day. How can you not feel like you're losing your mind when more than 90,000 have died? Almost 40 million are out of work, and the United States Senate is forming a lynch mob to go after Susan Rice and Barack Obama. We have fallen so far, so fast. And the only reason anyone has any hope that will change is you. So please take care of yourselves, wear masks, don't listen to the president, and avoid dumb fucks and red hats. We need you. He goes on, he criticizes Matt Lauer, he talks about Mark Lauder, who is the Trump campaign guy making fun of Joe Biden's stutter, and hits a whole bunch of other different news stories, again, with, I think, Mike Pompeo. It's a great newsletter, and I just read from it, and I think I read it pretty well, as a matter of fact. And the other one I often quote here on the podcast is WTF Just Happened Today by Matt Kaiser, and he writes in today's WTF Just Happened Today. Day 1217, we still have a long way to go. Today in one sentence, Trump threatened to, quote, hold up federal funds for Michigan and Nevada because they are expanding mail-in voting to make it easier to vote during the coronavirus pandemic. The CDC released its reopening guidance that the White House had shelved. The Supreme Court blocked Congress from seeing Robert Mueller's secret grand jury material. Mike Pompeo declined to be interviewed by the State Department Inspector General about the Trump administration's arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. And Republican political operatives are recruiting, quote, extremely pro-Trump doctors to go on TV and make the case for reopening the U.S. economy as quickly as possible. That is Matt Kaiser and his daily newsletter. Adam Parkamenko and Matt Kaiser are two that I really love, so I just want to give them shout-outs here on the podcast. What else can I tell you? We had a great time with Eric Siegel on Wednesday night, and a lot of new subscribers. I got to read those names. I keep forgetting to put the list together. A whole bunch of new subscribers today. 5 new folks alone. Sneaky suspicion they wanted to jump in and join in on the Eric Siegel conversation. Last week, it was Kenneth C. Davis who joined us live. And this week it was Eric Siegel. We got to get Dr. Aaron Carroll and all of your other favorites. Who would you like to hang out with on a video link one night, ask questions to, and be a part of that conversation? Let me know. Love to hear from you. I continue to reach out and meet subscribers of the show. Love to hear your stories. Love to bring you on as guests. So if I haven't heard from you or if we haven't connected, hopefully we will. What's the plan for Memorial Day weekend? Is that going to be weird like every single other moment seems to be in this new reality that we are living? I'm going to try to actually take a couple of days off, something I haven't really done a very good job of since I started the podcast. So I'm loading up on interviews this week and talking to a whole bunch of great people, and I'll try to lay them all out for you at the beginning of next week, including the Eric Siegel interview, which I think we'll put out on Tuesday. I'm thinking of maybe not even posting a show on Monday. I don't know. I probably will. I can't stop. I'm addicted to it. All right. So Dr. Christina Greer is a friend of mine who I've known from my days on the MSNBC panels with her. She joined me on the radio a couple of times, and I'm hoping she's going to join me a lot more because we had I think it was an hour-long conversation about race and relationships, kind of picking up where Jason Johnson and I left off. And it was great. It was fascinating. It was enlightening. And I learned a lot in this conversation, and I think you probably will as well. Dr. Christina Greer is on Twitter at Dr_CM Greer, and check her out there. Give her a follow. Get her book. Let's do this. I am recording, and I'm super happy I finally got my next guest. She is a political scientist. She is an associate professor at Fordham in New York City. You've seen her on TV. She's a great commentator and analyst on a broad range of issues. She's an author. Her book, Black Ethnics, is one that I don't have and I want to have, but I'm reading about it because I want to talk to you about it. She's a co-host of FAQ NYC, the politics editor of The Griot, host of The Aftermath on OZ, lots of different things. She's a PhD, Dr. Christina Greer. Thank you for joining me. So great to see you.
It's great to see you. I've missed you so much from the green rooms.
Yeah, I know. Seriously, it's always fun to be on TV for the fact that you meet people and you network and you make friendships there, not because the TV itself. It's exhilarating knowing that a lot of people are watching you and then going to social media. I love all that, but it's like 2-3 minutes too often. Yeah. And so the green room is kind of like the best part. Yeah,
I've met some of my closest friends in the green room.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and like getting my makeup done and,
You want to drop any names? People that you know. Okay. All right. We'll wait till I stop. I want to find out who your closest friend. But because I too have met a lot of people through that, and obviously through the radio and now the podcast. People continuing to come on. Anyway, happy to have you here, and great to have you joining me in conversation. There's a billion things I want to talk with you about, but I wanted to throw out a generality to get us started, which is what. Obviously, this is very general because I'm talking about a wide range of people. But is there a way to talk about the difference between the Black female American experience and the white male American experience in general, knowing that obviously white guys aren't monolithic, and you've written a book about how Black folks aren't monolithic. So is that a fair question to talk about the general differences in the life experience based on the vessels we're traveling in?
So whenever I get this question in class or some version of this question, I always tell my students, the demographic for me that means the most and kind of tells me the most is geography. So where you're from actually is my starting point before race, before gender. And I would say second to geography is class. And then we get into race and gender, for me at least, because I would think that if you are someone from Mississippi of a particular economic background, let's just say you're a Black woman from, deep Mississippi and you're working class, you might have more in common on certain issues with a white guy who works in the factory with you than you do with, say, some Northeast PhD girl who prefers to spend, time in Europe. So that's just something to think about. But then there are certain issues. I think it depends on the issue, right? And your sort of political reference point, which could mean something. But I've always found the tension and the relationship between white men and Black women fascinating, because I've always thought of, let's just say, white men are considered the baseline, right? If you're a statistician, you guys are like the dummy variable, and then we are all the ones that are compared against, the sort of main variable.
Yeah, I've never been referred to as the baseline. I guess I'm okay with it. It's pretty good. It's a good place to be.
You're the reference point, right? Yep. And like if this were stats, like you would be 0, and then we would, sort of code all the other variables accordingly. And so, and it doesn't have to be that way, but that's just the way it's been since the start of this nation. So I have always thought about white men, like if you guys are 12 o'clock, thinking about a circular clock, right? You all are 12 o'clock, and like white women are say like 3 or 4 o'clock, and black men are like 7 or 8 o'clock. I've always seen black women as 12 o'clock again, but like you're midnight and I'm noon, or you're noon and I'm midnight. So we're totally we're at the same place on the clock, but we're totally different times. And because there's something about race and gender, the intersectionality of the two, that I find, like when you look at someone who's like as insecure as Donald Trump, and like his certain animus when it comes to dealing with black women in particular, right? There's the gender piece and there's the racial piece. And if we think of those two just as like blatant binaries, then they would be the polar opposites, right? Male, female, black, white. And I think that placement in this country in particular, especially in this moment, is always fascinating to me to sort of think about it in a political sphere. If we think about it in a historical sphere, black women sort of being the closest to a household in a lot of ways, and sort of knowing not just the secrets, but sort of how people think, right? Especially when you're seen as invisible. I mean, that's like, I literally have been playing with this idea of like writing this book called The Black Girl in the Green Room, because the things that I hear from white men in the green room are fascinating because I'm invisible. So it's like, even with a full face of makeup, even with an earpiece in my ear, with stilettos on, ready to go, it's like white men can just...
What do you mean?
You know that green room on the 3rd floor?
No, I know. I've been in that green room with.
Oftentimes I would sit there, full face of makeup, lashes on, earpiece in, ready for, whomever to call. I'm fully dressed. And these guys would walk in, I look up from my phone. Hi, how you doing? Get a little quick hello. Another white guy would come in, a whole bunch of like networking, pulling out cards, trying to meet folks, right? And then they start having conversations, sometimes political, sometimes personal, sometimes professional. And I'm just sitting there as though it's like, I clearly can't be important to them, right?
That's so weird to me.
I haven't asked anything about myself. And so it's like the spook who sat by the door. I can just sit there and absorb loads of information. And so then, of course, when the producer comes in, they're like, Tom, Mike, Dr. Greer, come on back. And it's like, wait, what? And I'm like, I don't know who you thought I was. I'm sitting here with you. So, I mean, I think that's always the fascinating thing, where it's just like, and this is a lesson for anyone, right? If someone ends up at the table with you, even if you don't think that they're deserving of being there, you need to ask yourself how they got there. I do that all the time. I mean, I find it hilarious that it's like, I did a show many, many years ago, and I was with like some cats who were just like miscellaneous bloggers and whatever. And I was like, I mean, I just think this is, and 4 white men and myself. And I was just like, I just think this is hilarious, because it's like, I have to have a PhD in an award-winning book to be able to sit at the same table as a blogger.
Well, now that actually just hurt my feelings, because that's actually you and me in the green room. I mean, it is. I have an associate's degree, and don't try to like shine me up, because it's just, it's exactly.
You also spoke to me, though, and didn't treat me as though I was part of the...
But that's so weird to me. And I almost want to believe that it's not true, because when you're in the green room, you're at the table. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your back.
Or secretary who's holding their bag while they're on camera. I mean, because that's, people sometimes bring like an assistant.
Yeah, people come with an entourage sometimes, or a couple people, sometimes a family member. Someone they want to impress. Yeah. Oh, wow. Well, okay. So,
my whole thing is like, but I have a microphone in my ear. But I'm fully dressed.
Yeah.
I have Shirley Temple makeup.
Yeah. That's a good point. So, how could you possibly get past anything?
I don't know if we'll ever get to the bottom of that question, but I do think that it's something that needs to be unpacked in a historical and an institutional and a very real time perspective that I don't know if we'll ever
Well, one
solve.
of the things that I'm trying to do with this podcast, I've always tried to do with my conversation, and I guess personally with my life, is have conversations with people who are different than me, in terms of their life experience, for sure. But specifically when it comes to race and gender, and intersectionality, as you mentioned earlier, probably how I could have brought this conversation up. I'm very interested in obviously hosting, but watching the conversation between, in this case, a white guy and a black woman. And I wonder what your interest is and what you think the problem is with that. I think that it doesn't happen enough. And when it does happen, it's not genuine enough, or it's not interesting enough, or whatever. But what do you think about, just in terms of media or even in life, the conversation that can occur and what happens and what should happen? Because I find that my audience certainly really appreciates that I have access to you, PhD, Dr. Christina Greer at Fordham, black woman. And if I do a good job with the conversation, they really get a lot out of it. But where should that be conversation be had? How is it a good one? What's missing? And how do I, in this case, maybe even be better at it? Like
Right. Well, I think, as with all good conversations, one, I already think that you're ahead of the game because you're asking yourself these questions, and most people don't. Like, flat out. Most hosts, we see this all the time with panels, academics especially. It's like, stop having panels about gender with no women. Stop having panels about race with no people of color. Like, there are so many white men who think that they're the experts or the baseline, where they don't bother ever, whether it's black women, whatever demographic. They see themselves as the beginning and end, the alpha and the omega. And it's not about listening. It's about, this is my opinion, which is a proxy for facts. And everyone else can try and jump in. But at the end of the day, my opinion is what stands. It's what matters, and it is the beginning and the end point. And so I think the reason why people tune into your show, and the reason why you can get such interesting and diverse guests, and diverse in all facets of the word, is because you're actually interested. You're genuinely interested in learning something that you don't know. Like, you know what you know what you don't know, but you also know that there's a lot that you know you don't know, and there are even some things that you don't know. I sound like George Bush right now.
The Rumsfeld, I think, is who you're going for, and it's Rumsfeld? Really offensive.
But I think that, if you look at, journalists, if you look at folks on TV, there are a lot of folks that are ahistoric, and they don't feel like they need to, read other books from the past. They don't need to read diverse authors. I always find it so interesting when you ask people like, oh, what are your top, 10 books or whatever it may be? And it's like, you don't have not saying that you're not allowed to only like white men, but I think it does show you something when you ask people about, what do you like to read? And it's only white men in the canon, right? Only. So it's like, you don't read any women, you don't read any people of color, like, or like, what books have you read in the past, 2 years or something like that? So I think that part of
now you got me thinking.
I think part of the issue is that, a lot of folks who are in positions of power to direct conversation or to start conversations, start it from their comfort zone. They stay in their comfort zone. They talk to people within their comfort zone. Yeah. And it's never branching out in an intersectional way that would ever possibly challenge certain ideas or present an idea that maybe you've never even thought about it. It's like, well, if we're supposed to work together, I don't really prefer the term ally, but my expectation, my assumption is that if we're friends, you will be a proxy for me when I'm not there. So if someone says, a joke about N-word or, a sexist joke, it's like you would, even though you're not a black woman, you would be like, hey, that's messed up, and even if there are no black women there.
I did it on Friday.
See, there you go.
I was on a text chain with 16 of my high school friends, all white guys, as far as I know, all straight. I haven't told this anywhere. I don't think I said this on the podcast. And one of my friends just texted, "What's up, F words?" Yeah. And I didn't know what to do in terms of I'm definitely going to say something, but am I going to do it publicly in front of everybody on the text chain, or am I going to do it privately? And I go, I'll do both. So I publicly went, it's 2020. We all use that word in high school, but we're not anymore. And so don't. And then I texted him privately and I was like, dude, sorry I had to do that, but what on earth are you thinking? He's a very progressive guy.
Right.
And he tried to explain it.
We all have our comfort zones and we all have our Achilles heels, right? And we all have these, most people won't admit it, but like folks say sometimes, sometimes it's inappropriate, sometimes you don't know when it's appropriate. And I think it's, it's one of those things where I just remember in 7th grade, I went to a Quaker school, predominantly white. I would say this is middle school. So like maybe a third or maybe half Jewish because it was during the bar and bat mitzvah season. And I remember there was a guy who I was really good, white guy I was really good friends with, and he made a Polish joke. And like, I'm 12. I've never heard Polish jokes before, but something about it just made me feel really uncomfortable. Like, because my family doesn't tell those types of jokes. Mm-hmm. And so I went home that night and I was just like, sitting around the dinner table, how was the day? And I was like, okay, so I heard this joke. Everybody laughed. I think I may have like chuckled along because I'm, 12, but I was like, but I felt really uncomfortable and I don't know where it's coming from. Right. And my mom was like, because those are the jokes that like you can insert Jews, you can insert the N-word. Like those are the types of those recycled jokes where it's just like, it's not funny and they're super racist, no matter who says them across the board. So she was essentially like, and tomorrow it's on you to go up to him and tell him like, A, don't say it around me. Like B, think about, saying like whether or not you want to be that person who tells those jokes. Yeah. But if you are like, I'm not the one, like, and so when I did that, he was like, well, I didn't say, Black people. And I was like, see, that doesn't matter. It's just like, he wasn't understanding kind of the severity of what those jokes do and what they mean, Yeah.
But you took the I guess the risk of, like I did, granted, much different situation. You were a 12-year-old girl. I'm a 44-year-old man. There's a risk involved. Yeah, there still is. And I'm like, well, are all these high school friends of mine gonna say, oh, Pete's annoying, he's got to be politically correct on this text chain, and I was like, I hope if they do, fine. Well, like, fine. That's who I am. Like, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept, assholes. Like, who's doing that? What if one of these guys, we know that as far as we know, none of us are gay. But do you know that none of these guys who you haven't talked to in 15, 20 years doesn't have a gay kid? Or sibling even, like, you don't, or maybe is closeted and is struggling with it. Like, what are you doing? And he actually, he defended himself, by the way, and defended it. And I was like, you want to die on the F word hill? Really? Yeah. And he backed down.
But I think that's also what we have to ask ourselves, because it's like, so then what is the fear about speaking out? That what, you might lose a friend of 25 years who clearly doesn't share the same sort of life philosophy? I mean, for me, I think, I'm always like, we got to trim these hedges and, call the herd sometimes. So it's like, well, then that just means you got to get off the dance floor for a while. Like, I just feel like, it's sort of, when the Native Americans used to like burn parts of the forest so that, the trees would grow for the next season. I just feel like every season, sometimes that just needs to happen where you have to reevaluate friendships and relationships, because it's like sometimes you might need to just get out the way so like better people can come in.
I like that. I like the whole analogy, and then as it became literal, I think it's really interesting. So getting back to this, the relationship in media, I think it's less about any kind of like, I wasn't fishing for a compliment. I think it's interesting to have people with very different life experiences and conversation. It should get, quote, ratings. I'm not in the ratings game anymore, which is awesome. I'm in the, have an interesting conversation and learn from it game, and hopefully people care. But you would think that it would always be great content to have people with very different life experiences and conversations about the types of issues that we're talking about. You would think that.
If people can listen and they can hear and they can identify and sort of find commonality, right? But I think for a lot of people, it's like, well, if your experience isn't mine, then yours is wrong. I mean, like, there are those people.
Right. Yeah.
But I think also, like thinking about my book, the reason why I found it really hard to write was because, going back to our previous point, like sometimes there are sort of hard things to discuss, so it's like trying to unpack, like the way you say, it's like, okay, so maybe when we were in high school, we used the F word, but like, come on, guys, we're grown, we have families, we have life experiences. Like, let's not do that. You're also not airing your dirty laundry sort of, on television for everyone to see. Like when I was writing this book, I mean, there's some tensions between Black Americans, Caribbeans, and Africans that are historic. They're sometimes calcified. We're moving beyond it. But it was really hard to sort of process, like, how much of that conversation do you put out for the general public when we haven't resolved some of these debates?
That's really interesting. And I want to talk about the book, but just going back to one more thing that you said, I think is probably the most important thing, according to me, that resonated with me.
Yes, white man, tell me.
It is. It's probably most a white man problem, I would imagine, is the discomfort. The discomfort with knowing whether or not I can say the things I'm saying, ask the questions I'm asking. I imagine that you are, or any Black woman is far more comfortable in a conversation with a white man, in media especially, than the white man is, because the white guy's afraid of saying something wrong, offensive, being ignorant, whatever. And, if he means well. But I actually don't think about that stuff because I don't care. Like, that's the learning process. If I say something ignorant or offensive, that wasn't my aim, but you'll correct me and then I'll be better. Like, that's the way I look at it. Like, I'm not worried about stepping in shit. If I step in shit, I step in shit.
But I think your background as a comedian makes you skilled at that. And most people. Probably. I mean, like, I was talking to our mutual friend, Marina Franklin, and I was saying that, in this time of COVID, like, thank God for comedians. Like, you all are the canaries in the mine in a lot of ways. You're the ones who help sort of say these complex, confusing thoughts that we're trying to process. Like, sometimes, is it too early to make a joke about COVID? Like, like all these things. I mean, you make us laugh when we want to just be curled up in a ball, but like, you all sort of serve as our id and our ego simultaneously and give voice to a lot of the happiness, confusion, and frustration. So I think your background as a comedian makes it such that, like, your skin is much thicker. You're used to being told no, where I would say, the vast majority, I mean, look at these people who are marching on, the Capitol and in state houses, or protesting every day. Many white Americans they've never heard the word no.
Yes.
Never. Not in school. And bad behavior has been explained away. We've seen this with sexual assault. We've seen this with sort of people who are lighting trash cans on fire. It's like, oh, well, we chalk it up to boys will be boys. Certain boys will be boys, not all, right? I mean, you can look at Jerry Maguire and sort of see there's a lot of racial and gender context in that movie.
I don't remember. I mean, I'm sure you're right. But now I'm like, wait, what was Jerry Maguire?
I think, just as growing up in this nation, the reason why I, can be in COVID and like shelter in place, and it's like, okay, it's like, well, I know that there are rules. I know that there are rules that are applied differently. I know that, me wearing a mask isn't the same thing as you wearing a mask. Like, I know that Black men jogging isn't the same as you jogging, whether it's at 6 a.m., 6 p.m., or, 10 p.m. So there, as James Baldwin says, it's like, Black people, for us to survive in this nation, we have to know everything about you all and also ourselves. White people oftentimes never have to, if you want to be successful and a billionaire in this country, you don't have to interact with people of color. If I want to be successful, I have to interact with white people. There is no like Black enclave.
What if my product is Black women's hair product? Yeah,
well, you're still, if you want to go global, right, or have like a major corporation or get a loan at the bank, like, I mean, there's so many steps. You still have to interact with white people in some capacity, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so, it's like, or buying, hair supplies. It's like, I'm dealing most likely with like white manufacturers. So there are ways that white people can be successful in this nation without ever having to interact with people of color, Let
me amend that a tiny bit. And I think it's a really important thread that there needs to be a lot more scholarship on. I'm sure there is a ton. I just don't know about it. But the point of white men never being told no, I would say, we've been told no, but only by specific people in specific roles, our parents and maybe the police or even like a principal or a teacher. But as we but not by other people that are our peers. And as we become adults, I don't want a good example that's not race-based is like, you can't tell me that I have to wear a mask in your establishment. And I don't care, by the way, if you're a Black woman or a white man, you can't tell me that I have to wear a mask. And so many other much more serious things. You can't tell me what to do. Only my mom, dad can, or the person in authority can. But the idea then of someone who is equal, quote, equal or lesser than you, it's like these white people that would say, there's just, I don't like Barack Obama. Why? He talks down to me. But I like Joe Biden. I've heard that specifically before, but I like Joe Biden. Well, what's the difference?
But here's the thing. Most white people don't have any friends of color. There was a survey that came out many, many years ago, and it surveyed white Americans and said, how many of you have a black friend? 40. This is during Obama. 40% said they have a black friend. Mm-hmm. That black friend cannot be in your employ. Goes down to 10%. Most white people don't have a black friend. Most black people have white friends.
What is a black?
A lot of white people have a black friend.
When is it a friendship? If I work with a guy at the factory and we're really friendly at work on the line in the break room, maybe we sit together, like he's my friend, right? Or not? Because I think my threshold is, has he been in my home and have I been in his home?
Yeah.
And until then,
because keep in mind, in the South, rules can be a little different. I think if someone is on your payroll or you sign their checks, that's not a friendship.
Great point.
You can call it whatever you want. Sure, it can be a version thereof. But when lots of people are like, well, my nanny is my friend. No, she's not. She smiles at you and she laughs at your corny jokes because you sign her check every week and she needs this job. Like, you guys aren't friends.
Yep.
Because guess what? If that paycheck goes away, she probably does too. So stop it. I think, though.
She still keeps coming and hanging out.
Yeah.
Watching your kids for free.
Right. I just love it. Because, people always use the phrase like, oh, she's like family. I was like, except for the fact that you pay her, because that's what it is.
That phrase is so often used about someone who is a nanny or a housekeeper or something. It really is intimately close with you and your family. That's my really good friend. And I think that's such a good point that you made. If they're on the payroll, stop it. If they report to you, no.
But this is why I think Northerners and Southerners differ, but Mark Twain's my favorite author. And, he was always like, listen, Northeastern women are way worse than Southern women. I mean, he's got some fascinating theories about how white women in the Northeast are just way more dangerous than white women in the South. But I think relationships, I'm fascinated by interracial friendships in the South, because they do look a little differently, but sometimes they're a little more realistic and authentic. But I just saw Knives Out this weekend. Did you see that?
I haven't seen it yet, no.
It is mandatory. That's your homework.
Okay. All right.
I love giving homework. Christopher Plummer, my secret boyfriend. He's not aware of that yet, but he will be.
Really? Christopher, isn't he much older?
Captain Van Trapp from Sound of Music.
He's your guy of all? He's very old for you. I feel.
Yes, he's a little older for me. He's a little older gentleman. But like Michael Shannon, Toni Collette, Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Johnson, Lakeith Stanfield, Daniel Craig. Star-studded cast. Okay. But the great thing is they have a Latinx woman who's the caretaker. And what's so hilarious and heartbreaking and just cruel is that at some point in time, everyone in the movie says, oh, she's like family to us, as they try and, screw her over. But what's so great is she's Latinx. And so you first hear someone say like, oh, she's wonderful. Her family's from Brazil. And then another family member is like, and they're from Uruguay. Another person's like, so wonderful. They're from Ecuador. And it's like, her mom's an immigrant from Paraguay. And it's like, oh my gosh, she's like family. And and it's just these subtle, they keep throwing out these countries, but they mention, I think, no fewer than 4 countries throughout the film, because no one has bothered to ever ask her anything real about herself or her family. They're just like, oh, well, she's from Ecuador. It's like, no, she's not.
Well, did you hear it? I felt like you reached out to me and that's how we reconnected. And that's how I was like, where are you? We come on the show. You heard the Jason Johnson conversation?
Right? And Jason Johnson, we share a mutual best friend. So I talk to him on a regular basis.
Well, I just thought it was I was not expecting to have that conversation with him. But we were talking about, romantic relationships and dating, interracial relationships. And it was you get kind of an updated conversation for 2020, but mostly just getting his point of view and his life experience on it. And that was very interesting to me. So let me just ask you, I actually want to talk to you about your book really badly. I'm trying to get there. But let me just ask you, this conversation that we're having about, interracial friendships and relationships, and maybe you want to make it personal, maybe you don't, but like, what do you think about relationships, whether it be with women, friendships, or intimate, interracial, today in 2020, because I feel like what you said is so true about we don't have a lot of friends. We self-segregate in so many different ways. And what is your view on it in 2020? What's your personal experience on it in life?
So I think we have to break it down.
Who are your best white friends?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to break it down generationally, too, because I think sort of the younger folks have a totally different...
You do? You think, but you would know because you're a college professor.
Yeah, so like people who are college age, but also thinking about my niece who's in, high school and my other niece who's in, elementary, like they have like some real genuine interracial relationships. I think, as someone who's in her early 40s, it's like, I'm looking around and a lot of my white friends, I'm like, I'm your only Black friend in all of your travels, in all of your school settings, and all of your graduate programs. Like you got one and done. Like, to me, that's problematic, and it's like, whether we're friends in middle school, high school, college, graduate school, it's like, so I'm your one. What does that say? So when I go to their parties and I'm looking around, I'm like, you don't have any people of color with me. That's a problem. Like, for me, that's a problem, because I'm just like, what is it about how you're structured? And mind you, all of my friends live in major cities. So it's like, what is it about you and how you're structuring your life? Because it's like, you're not, in the abbey or monastery. Like, you're in major cities. You're working for major corporations, interacting with different people. So like, that to me is always a yellow flag.
What about what's the deal with elementary and junior high school, especially? So my daughters are 12 and 15, and it's mostly white, but there's a fair amount of diversity where we live in Clarkstown School District in Rockland County, New York. But my kids aren't friends with anybody who is different than them. And it seems like the kids very much segregate. And like Ava was on the track team, on the relay team, and all the other girls were Black. And I was kind of like, I wasn't sure the appropriateness of me pushing, like, are you going to be, here's your opportunity to be friends with people who are different. And I think her response was, yeah, we're friendly. We're really friendly. We love being on the same team, but they're not inviting me over. Right. And I'm like, well, you want to invite them over? And she's like, I mean, I don't even know if they want to hang out. Like, it was just a weird, awkward conversation because I don't want, why are they self-segregating? And I actually but put a lot of the onus on the minorities, the Indian kids, the Asian kids, the Black kids. They all sit together. They stay, and you understand why. You understand why they have a common ethnicity, religion, culture, language, experience. They want to keep each other safe. But I still am like, well, what's that about? How come, especially at that age, elementary and junior high school, why are they so self-segregated? And what is my responsibility?
The white kids do too. All the white kids sit together at lunch too. Like, that famous book, like, why do all the Black kids sit together at lunch? It's like, because all the white kids sit together at lunch.
So it's a matter of the white kid. Like, if the white kid invited the Indian kid over, they'd come and they'd stay. I mean, it's deeper. I feel
state of elementary schools today, but like, I think a lot of the onus is put on the kid of color who is in the minority in a majority setting. And like, let's be clear, people say things in the privacy of their own homes that are really jacked up and sometimes racist, right? And
where racism is safest.
Right. And so, but the thing is, all that gets trickled down to school. Like, I think parents would be appalled at some of the things that they've said, maybe in passing, just as a joke to their partner, like not even thinking that the kids pick it up. And it's like, kids pick it up. Like, as someone who went to school with white folks, the vast majority of my life, it's like, yeah, you hear these little things. Parents would be mortified to know some of the things that their kids say when they're just, these are subcultures, I mean, I also think it's interesting because I went to private schools my whole life, but like the few Black kids that were in my class, they weren't tracked. I mean, every school tracks. I don't give a shit what you say. Like, whether it's public school, private school, parochial school, and I happened to be in like the honors and AP classes, and all the other Black kids were tracked where I never took a single class with Black kids. And
explain the word tracked. Explain what tracked means.
Oh, tracking, where it's just like you go in and they sort of decide whether or not you're going to be. You remember in kindergarten, you were either in the A group, the B group, or the C group. You know, like the red group, the blue group, the yellow group. The red group's the smart kids, the blue group's the middle kids, and the C group's is like, you know, the yellow group is like, you know, let's see if you make it to first grade. And so it starts really early, and you sort of get locked in to what group you're going to be in, either the super advanced, the sort of middle of the road,
academically,
or the quasi remedial. And I never took classes with any of the Black kids because they were sort of locked into the third group, which is, you know, the lowest group. And I was locked into the highest group. The only reason why I had lunch with them is because the super AP kids and the super remedial kids just happened to have the same lunch block. That's the only reason why I actually had lunch with Black folks. And so, but we never took classes together. And I think there are a lot of schools where it's like, well, my kid's school district's pretty diverse. It's like, is it? Because once they're in the building, they may never see each other. And there are a lot of ways that principals are just like, oh, no, we've got, 30% kids of color, 40% kids of color. It's like, right. But they're not taking any classes together because you see it in every single type of school. Coincidentally, the vast majority of kids of color, Black and Latinx kids, not Asian and Indian kids, but like Black and Latinx kids tend to get tracked out of the mainstream and pushed aside to lower groups.
I want to unpack why that
starts really early, because that starts in third grade when white teachers see Black boys as threatening and they're afraid of them.
There's a lot to ask about that, but I want to unpack about that and get to the root of it. But, I wanted to ask you about your book. I want to make sure I ask you about it, and I want to get it and read it and understand it. But it's called Black Ethnics. Do I have it right? There's a subtitle? I'm just looking here.
Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream.
There it is. I found it. Forgive me for not having that up in front of me.
It's a beautiful cover.
It really is. It is a beautiful cover. How come I don't have this book? Anyway, I will get it. And so basically you took a deep dive on the diversity of people of color in this country. Is that a one way of saying it? Yeah. And I so often hear the phrase and say the phrase, well, Black people aren't monolithic. And then you say something, followed up as that's just a disclaimer. But you actually went in to prove that using data. And it's very interesting. It's got to be very interesting because there's so much diversity. And we started talking about this a little bit before I hit record. But, I mean, give me the kind of synopsis. Well, why did you want to write this book, I guess, first of all? So
I start with a little vignette of when I started Tufts in Massachusetts, and we went on the Cape. So you could volunteer to go on this 3-day retreat with the other Black students who started, in your year. And, when I went to college, that was the most Black students I'd ever been with in my entire academic life. So that was 60 Black students out of a class of 1,200. It was the biggest Black class in the history of the university at the time. And when we went on this retreat, the facilitator asked all of us, we're all freshmen, close your eyes and raise your hand if your parents told you when you get to Tufts, don't get wrapped up with the Black kids. And I was like, that's like such a random question. Like, we're all Black on this trip. So I opened up my eyes and everyone's hands raised except for the 6 Black Americans on the trip. And because everyone else is Caribbean or African, first, second generation, third, whatever it may be. And so that was the launch point of a really interesting set of questions that we had, I would say, for the 4 years of my college experience. Because we had our Black Student Association, which we call the Pan-African Alliance, which was, I would even say, a progressive name at the time, because that was a name to try and encapsulate the diversity within Black folks. So we called it the Pan-African Alliance. But I just found it fascinating that the Caribbean students broke off and formed their own club, like the Caribbean Students Association, and the African students broke off and formed their own African Student Alliance. But they still maintained membership with the PAA, which is in most colleges you call it the BSA, the Black Student Association. Yep. So they had this dual membership of having a specific ethnic identity, but also a larger shared racial identity, because there were certain things that would happen to us as Black people on campus, as Black people in Boston, where it's just our parties would get broken up, but we didn't have drinking or drugs, but the frat house next door, would drink with the cops, and do beer shots. And I was like, everyone next door is underage. and there's like serious drugs, but like our parties got shut down. So, just some racialized things that would happen. So I was wondering like what substantive coalition building would look like or could look like if we kind of got through some of our tensions and sort of some of the things and the stereotypes that were kind of keeping us apart politically. Because, people would speak in this coded language when I would ask, like, oh, I'm writing this book about Blacks and Caribbeans and Africans. And, you got a version of, well, it's like, well, you know how they can be. And they meaning one of the groups. So that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's hard. It was hard to write it because it's like part of this did feel like, kind of inside conversations that don't leave the house. These are sort of like tensions within the family. So how do I write about it in a way that makes sense for Black people where they can see themselves in the book, but also it's like, I'm not saying one group is better than the other, but like recognizing that like a diverse group of people will most likely read this book, not just Black people. So like what happens when you have, non-Black people reading about some of our tensions and struggles and in a political sphere and sort of how we're thinking about coalition building. So that's kind of
when you have, that's got to be challenging, very personal, and not trying not to step on minds the whole time. But when you have to be perfect all of the time to perform and to gain respect in our nation and our society, it means you almost don't want to point out the imperfections or the flaws because it just gives fuel to the fire that you're trying to put out. It gives ammunition to the people. The
Obama debate, like how Black people were silent for 8 years in a lot of ways, because it's like we understand what this man is going through. He is by far not perfect, and everyone gets it. But that dagger is coming from him from all these other people, and
OJ.
How much do we critique him? In the moment.
OJ, I always felt like. And I don't know if there's any truth to this, that Black people knew OJ was guilty, but they were like, listen, this guy, Black people have been persecuted forever. Let's let this rich Black guy go. Sometimes someone who's clearly done something wrong, they still don't want to point it out because it's like, we got to live with this all day long. I'm not going to get on that on Cosby or something. And what do you think of those two examples? Is that
so? I think it's hilarious because Jason Johnson and I were talking about this. We both feel like
it's not at all, but let's not, by the way, throw Obama in the Cosby and OJ basket. I'm not doing that. I'm just going way further.
Taking Barack Obama completely off the table right now. But there's something about white people in OJ that's completely like, I don't think Black people really think about OJ. White people bring up OJ on a daily basis. Like I went on like a movies binge this weekend. I'm binge watching The Sopranos. I was watching tons of different movies. Like OJ Simpson comes up in like random movies. Just there's a certain ire. Like I feel like that whole situation. I'm not going to put it all on him. Like he broke the nation, but like there's something about that moment with OJ in particular that like this country was. It like fell off its axis and it's just never been right since. I think that there is like, I really don't, Black folks we don't think about OJ Simpson. The number of people I talk to on a daily basis that like, it's still in the craw of America. Like, how dare he, how did he use our system, right? How did he use our legal system to sort of do something to a white woman? He didn't do this to his first wife. It's like to a white woman. Like this is the antithesis of what this country is supposed to be about.
The way I see the OJ and Cosby examples these are two Black men who had achieved a type of success that very few Black men have the opportunity to do in this country. And they end up being guilty of horrible things and they topple off that mountain. And there could be some joy with racist people like, see? None of them can make it. There could be, I think Obama, if you want to be so simple, Obama disproves all of that because he's so, obviously he's flawed, but he was so perfect as a president in many ways. But I think that there's this idea of looking at these guys who have, Cosby especially, he did more as a role model for the Black family than arguably anybody else. And then there he goes.
Well, forget the role model stuff. What he did as far as financing Black producers and directors and
actually yeah
like in
actions 60s, louder than words. Sure. Yeah.
I had Melvin Van Peebles in my class 1 year.
He was
a
student?
No, Melvin Van Peebles' granddaughter was in my class. So Melvin Van Peebles came into my class because he had watched Watermelon Man, which is a movie that he directed.
Yes.
But he talked about how Bill Cosby gave him $50,000 in like 1969 so that he could direct one of the first, Gordon Parks is technically the first Black Hollywood director, but his film wasn't made in Hollywood. So Melvin Van Peebles is the first Black Hollywood director, all business in Hollywood. And he gave him $50,000 cash to make this, he made Sweetback's song. And Melvin Van Peebles is like, why don't you do it? Like, you're Bill Cosby. You can be the first. And he's like, no, I want you to do it. So he contextualized how Bill Cosby would throw this money around and invest in people. So, I think with a lot of really disturbed and disturbing people, there's a pattern where they do really amazing things and really horrible things, which sort of buys weird silence from some and sort of a certain level of disbelief from others, right? Because some people would probably find it very hard to believe that this man who did all these amazing things, I've got ambulances in BK, could also be capable of doing these horrific things as well. So I would put him in a weird category, but I think it reminds me of these Mark Twain stories that I read, which is, Pudd'nhead Wilson is my favorite Mark Twain book, and it's because Mark Twain was always so broke.
Jeez, what is that book? I don't even know.
Pudd'nhead Wilson, it's my favorite. And the reason why I got it from a used bookstore, and I bought it because there is a foreword by Langston Hughes. It's like a old edition. It's a novella. It's really short. But the genius of Mark Twain is that because he was always so broke, he's terrible with, he made a lot of money, but he was terrible with his money. He wrote that book, and it's a perfect foil. When I say perfect foil, there's a set of twins. There's some black white stuff. There's some cross dressing stuff. I mean, there's some fascinating things. But he wrote it so that the premise is a slave woman switches the master's child and her child at birth. She's afraid that her child's going to get sold downriver. So she was like, well, if I raise my child as the master's child, then I will always know where my child is, right? So even because the way genes work, her child was very fair, even though he's black, but it didn't matter what it looked like. He's black, so that's that. So she switches them at birth, and so they grow up, and the rich kid, who's technically the black kid, right? But he thinks he's the master's son. He goes off to Yale. He's a horrible person. Horrible person. And the white son, who's raised as a slave in chattel slavery, is, sweet and nice and, just plays his position. And so the beauty of the story is that if you believe in the institution of slavery, you can look at the rich son who goes off to Yale and it's like, see, even if you give black people education and money, they're still these evil characters, right? It doesn't matter what you give them or how much they attain, they're shady to the core. He's got some problems. But if you believe in abolition, it's see, the institution of slavery can turn good people into these horrible monsters, and this is why we shouldn't do it. So, I think that there's so much about
sociology.
Yes, sociology, but how we view society, it's it really depends on sometimes what we want to see out of the person, and what we can tell ourselves about certain people. Because it's let's be clear, I grew up knowing about the Cosby casting couch, forever.
Yeah, I did. I knew about it too. Yeah. Woody
Allen, R. Kelly, all these guys have been in our collective imaginations forever. I'm on a serious movie binge. I saw 25th Hour, the Spike Lee directed, Philip Seymour Hoffman. What's his name?
Saw that either.
Rosario Dawson, Ed Norton. He has 25 hours before he goes to prison. It's
yes. Yeah, I did see it. I don't remember it.
The World Trade Center right after 9/11. Beautifully shot. But, there's a passing joke. This is from 2001. The movie was filmed. It came out in 2002. There's a passing joke about R. Kelly. Just
Harvey Weinstein, everybody knew about too.
Everybody. So, I think it's just,
in the business.
I think it's just the things that we tell ourselves is what the society is all about, right? Whether we tell ourselves
what should we do to combat that? Should I just tell myself a different story to compensate for that? Because it does. You say the things we tell ourselves, but isn't that then lead to a bias, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I think the things I tell myself are backed up by reading and conversations with diverse people.
So that's what we should do. That's the answer.
But I mean, the thing is, it's like, first of all, a lot of people don't read. Like I was so appalled, you know, when the president first got elected in 2016. My biggest gripe that I would constantly, like whenever I was, you know, talking to on TV or radio or podcast or whatever, I was like, I cannot believe we have a president who doesn't read.
Yeah. Very weird. Very strange. George W. Bush didn't seem particularly curious, which is probably had a lot to do with the fact that he grew up, you know, with his dad and in that family or something. But like it would seem that any other president, much less senator or mayor, would really be curious about all, like every presidential history. And like, can you imagine like living in the White House and just all day I would want to be watching documentaries and reading books about my predecessors, but yet he has none.
I mean, Obama would literally have a thought. It was like, I wonder if string theory works in the summertime. And boom, the next morning he's having breakfast with like the foremost, you know, premier.
Is that right? He would use his access. That's what I do, by the way, with this show.
Talking to like some of the most interesting people. Like, well, when else am I going to be able to just call someone up and have beckon them to have 30 minutes of coffee with me?
But that goes back to your answer because Obama does it, and that's what I'm doing, and obviously that's what you're doing with reading books and spending time with a diverse group of people. The answer to this whole conversation is that's how you correct for it, or that's how you do it. You be curious and you read. I think a lot of people
aren't curious. I don't think that they're intellectually curious, and I don't think that they're curious about.
I have a hard time with that. I have a very hard time, and I understand that. I agree with you, obviously. But how could you not be curious? What's life without like
comfort,
like it's
safety?
Right. Okay.
Honestly, I think, Pete, like, I don't think that you give your career as a comedian enough credit for who you are. Now, granted, we're not besties yet, but like, I'm friends with a lot of comedians of different stripes, different ages, but like, since the dawn, I mean, I was a classics minor in college, right? So I studied Greek tragedies, I studied comedies, like these are the essence of comedies, right?
Yeah.
The role of the comedian in society is as important as the role of an executive. I mean, when you think of like Julius Caesar or, you know, when you read Sophocles, like if you think of, you know, Oedipus, like there's always some sort of, you know, Shakespeare, there's the role of a comedian to contextualize the moment and the past is like,
well,
it's essential for society to function.
That's it. That's the reason why I have a little bit of trouble with that is because what you're saying is going back to curiosity. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. Comedians are by nature curious people. You can't be a good comedian, much less a comedian, without being curious because you're constantly coming up with questions that can become bits that people can relate to. But the reason I'm having a kind of a hard time with that is you're making it sound like, you know, comedians are integral, and maybe they are. And, you know, satire is really important to the health of a society or something like that. But I guess my problem is like so many comedians I know are shitty people. So it's like, I don't want to give them too much credit. Like also amazing people, but not nearly as many.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, let's be clear. It's like
a weird thing
comedians make for society, but most people don't see the shitty person. We just see who you present to us.
Yeah. Well,
you help us.
A lot of shit.
Like, what happens behind the curtain? That's on you.
Oh, let's say that.
Like, I mean, we've seen you guys, you know, unfortunately, you all have a rough history of, you know, sort of people kind of giving themselves to society and to audiences, and then behind closed doors, you know, substance abuse or whatever it may be, and kind of destroying themselves after they've given everything to society. Thinking about Pryor and Belushi and, you know, all these.
Yeah, so many. Yeah.
You guys have
Chris Farley.
Disproportionate long list.
Yeah.
But I think that in this moment, the intellectual curiosity, whether it's news, whether it's just trying to I try and understand why, you know, my sister's a doctor, works in the hospital. I worry about her. Yeah, I actually try not to worry because it's like, I'm like not that type of person. But, you know, she's telling me about these new people who are anti-maskers. So they come into the hospital and they have some sort of medical condition where they can't wear a mask. And they're there to just sort of like be in the hospital without wearing a mask. And I'm like,
what? They don't need to be in, they don't need, they're trying to make a statement. They don't need, that's a
like
thing.
Anti-vaxxers, they're anti-maskers.
And they're trying to make a statement by going into a hospital, even though they don't need
for any reason to be in the hospital? What?
Without a mask on. And yeah. So like for me, and I think this is also like being a teacher, it's like I have to try and understand people because I have to try and reach you.
Sure.
So like, I have students sometimes who come in and they say like wild stuff. And it's like, okay, let me just like back up to try and figure out where they're coming from so I can like walk them through just a series of what I might see as logical steps and just at least get them to change the way they at least just the angle in which they look at the river. I'm not trying to get them to go to a new river. I'm just saying, I want you to keep looking at the same thing, but just shift your focus ever so slightly. You can shift it back once we're done. But, like if someone's like, yeah, I just don't think that we should be giving money to welfare queens. And, like that's my tax money and my grandfather worked hard and everyone's equal, so it's like, okay. So then we have to walk through some historical stuff. We've got to walk through, social safety net, what happens when you have it, and just like, I have a limit. It's like a stopwatch, right? I've got 3.5 months to do something to at least just help you like be curious about someone else. How
effective are you generally, and how much does it have to do with their age and place in life? They're at an Institute of Higher Learning, a pretty prestigious one where you're at in Fordham, and you would think that they would be, more open-minded and want to learn. So so they'd be the most. As opposed to the guys listening to my radio show and just calls up and goes off on welfare queens, like that guy's not predisposed to being curious. How effective is your approach been?
Well, here's the thing. So I think you're totally right. I mean, the fact that someone's paying money to be in an institution for learning, not everyone is there to sort of get their minds changed or see different vantage points, but the vast majority are.
Yeah, but to come into class with your college professor, the PhD, and tell them that it all is a very arrogant and strange thing.
You would be surprised.
I really would be. That's a show.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be clear. There's data that shows that women in the professor, especially women of color. I mean, we're challenged more. Our evaluations are different. The things that people notice about us, and it's like, how is she an authority? It's like, I don't know. And so, like, I just sort of started. I was like, here are the books that I've written. Here's what I've done. Here's what I do. Ask around. Right. And it's like, I'm not saying I'm the authority on everything, but like, there's some things that I do know and this is it. Right. And so like, we can go through that. And it's like, and we're not here to be friends. Right. I'm just here to help you. I'm your shepherd, and got to be careful of the Jesuit institution saying that. But it's like, I'm just here to help direct whatever it is that you're interested in. Like, I've got 3.5 months to pull something out of you and like help you sort of get a foundation in your own passion.
So how effective are you and your methods with the student who comes in with that point of view that you mentioned? I
would say I got a nice little batting average. But Good. Here's the beauty of teaching. I never write anyone off. Never.
I know a lot of teachers who do.
Yeah, well, that's just...
I don't know. Can't say they're college professors, but
here's the thing. Teaching is like sowing seeds. It's not like so. It's more like blowing those weird daffodil things that we used to blow as kids, and your dad would be like, "Don't mess with my lawn; those are weeds."
I think those aren't those dandelions?
Those are dandelions. I call them dandelions, but they're weeds.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Go ahead.
Back up your whole yard, and so we used to love to blow those as kids.
Yeah.
But like that to me is teaching, and so there's certain students where it's like at the end of the semester, I have seen your growth from point A to point B. Like, boom, I get it. I reached Pete. He's all into it. Now he wants to be a poli-sci major, and I've gotten him an internship and all this other stuff.
Yep.
Then the reason why I teach intros, because I always tell them, I'm like, I like to steal all the smart kids from the other majors before you guys have a chance to like take, psychology and econ and whatever. So it's like, I like to steal you right when you're like, fresh off the airplane or off, mom and dad's vehicle. So some of those students, it's like, by the time I see you as a senior, I'm like, wow, look at that Pete. Came in, got like a C- in my class, and like now he's just like, he's going off to, law school or whatever, grad school. And it's like, he's like, he got it somewhere along the line, whether I helped or, but I put a foundation there and like he built some great structure.
That's great.
And then there are other students who was just like, I'll get an email 3, 4, 5 years after graduation. It's like, just want to check in. Here's what I'm doing. Some amazing thing wherever. And it's like, I just thought about your class, thought about you. And so it's like, wow, I think I gave you a D. Like, and look at you. So it's like, or I gave you a B plus, and like, I didn't think you were spectacular, but like, I still gave you attention and like wanted to sort of put something inside and like try and figure out what you like. So it's like you just never know.
Right. Never write them off. Huh.
I have lots of professors where I didn't think about them until like grad school. It's like, damn, that was a great class.
Sure.
Oops.
Well, I appreciate you letting me be and my audience be in your class today. I look forward to the next class, and I love talking to you. I realize we talked for an hour, and I don't want to take any more of your time up, but I could actually have to talk to somebody else, and I would really not. I don't want to talk to them. Not for the show, folks. It's a different thing that a call I had scheduled, but I really want to just keep talking to you, and so we'll pick up very soon. I hope whenever you're available. I so appreciate your time.
All right, you stay healthy. Tell the girls I said hey.
I will, and okay. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot, Christine.
Okay.
All right.
Take care, Pete.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Christina Greer. Was that some good stuff? Boy, did I enjoy talking to her and learning from her along with her. Hope you did as well. Give her a follow on Twitter and tell her that you heard her here on Stand Up with Pete Dominick, the podcast. Okay, so the next conversation is my conversation with Bill B in DC. At Bill B in DC is his Twitter handle. And his friend he introduced me to, which is Jonathan Katz. Jonathan Katz is a former congressional staffer, real smart guy who also worked at the State Department and then now is at the German Marshall Fund. On Twitter at John D. Katz, Jon D. Katz, Katz. Had a little technical difficulties here with his feed, but I think it turns out all right. Switched off one feed, and I then called him on another channel. Anyway, I think it works out fine. We had a really good conversation. The week in politics, the hot items and topics of the week. Great analysis from both these guys. Bill B. in D.C., Jonathan Katz, backyard politics, D.C. style, right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got them, and I wish I was recording 5 seconds ago when Katz and Boyle were already attacking each other. It's what I'm calling backyard politics with Boyle and Katz. Katz and Boyle. We've got these two very smart guys joining me, Bill Boyle, Jonathan Katz. Katz is actually important and has important jobs and has had important jobs at the German Marshall Fund and in Congress, and Boyle runs parking garages, but very smart, and we love having him. Boys, thank you for joining me.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
Okay, let's start with the world watching us. John, you are a guy who pays close attention to America's role in the world, American interests, and our reputation, and how it is either going well or going badly. And I got to wonder how the rest of the world is seeing Americans protesting that they can't go out and partying on the beach and everywhere else, where it seems, maybe I'm not watching enough international media, that the rest of the world is following the rules and behaving a little bit more maturely. How are they seeing us right now?
Well, I think they largely see the U.S. through the eyes of Donald Trump these days. He's the main voice out there, sends mixed messages about the importance of addressing the coronavirus, keeping people safe on one hand. On the other hand, he's advocating for those people to go out and party on the beach, go to the bars, line up in capitals with their guns. And so it's a mixed message. And then the external message from Trump and from the White House is the rest of the world, if we have a vaccine, it's us first. That's it. There's not even a conversation about how do we make certain that the rest of the world gets a vaccine, because let's not forget that if the rest of the international community remains destabilized economically and politically, it impacts the United States, our security, our economy, not only for a short time, but for a long term. So the U.S. has every interest in the world to be out front, be generous, and then also here at the United States to do the right thing at home. And what they're saying is the opposite. And so I think you're seeing a narrative that suggests that the United States is not equipped and ready to handle this type of an event, and that, in fact, it's dangerous. It presents a danger.
Well, I've been thinking for a long time that America first is not America first. It's Trump first. It's just him. It's his own personal interests, his own financial interests, and more importantly, just his own reputation. That's not America's interests. I don't even see it as America first, whether it be trade or immigration or anything else. Bill, what do you think about America first versus Trump first, my theory?
Well, I don't even think that it's Trump first in this sense. In that Trump, by any rational understanding of his behavior, is hurting himself. If Trump had any rational comprehension of his own behavior and how it benefits him, he would have come out pushing for testing and everything else in January. And his approval rating right now in a country that had handled it much better would be 65%. He would be doing fine. I mean, there's a million things Trump could always have done that would put him in a much better political position, make him getting reelected almost a shoo-in. But Trump, it's not America first. It's America and Trump's own sort of narcissistic pathologies first. And that's really what's happening. Trump supporters, they're Trump supporters because of their insecurities about race and class. They're not Trump supporters because they sat down and said, I'm a, ex-urban guy, construction worker in Ohio. Obama got me reasonably decent health care, and I was making more money and doing better under Obama. But I'm going to vote for Trump. Well, you vote for Trump because he is the guy saying the black guy was bad. I mean, that's the reality of it. So it's not America first because, trust me, nothing Trump has done has been good for America, and it hasn't even really been good for himself.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that last part. John, what about the fact that the President of the United States yesterday came out and said that he was taking hydroxychloroquine? When you heard that, I guess there's two answers to this that a lot of people are saying is either I don't believe that he's taking it, which begs the question, why would he say that? Or, man, how stupid is he that he's taking it? What's yours?
So if both responses are right, so he's wrong for going out there to saying that anybody should take this, because medically people have been said not to take this. It's problematic. It has life-threatening side effects. So the fact that goes back to your original question, Pete, why do people look at the United States and look and say there's failed leadership in response to COVID-19? It's this kind of crap that's being pulled by the President of the United States in a very public way that puts people at danger. And then you don't really know if he's actually telling the truth. Is he trying to bolster an argument in favor of this particular drug? Is he trying to look like he is, not afraid to do something because he needs to be there to be safe and healthy for the American public? I don't think anybody buys it. So I think there was a lot of Republicans, and there's been a number of stories suggesting that they're concerned about when he gets out there and make these statements that politically it's hurting the Republican Party. Clearly it hurts him. So I don't see how this is a strategy, but also what Bill said too, he's doing things that seem to, in his own way, trying to serve his best interests, but they serve no one's interest.
How about you, Bill? What do you think of his saying that he's taking this drug?
Well, when I think that you don't have competence, the only thing you have left is ideology, right? And so Trump and these guys, they don't know what the fuck they're doing, to put it undiplomatically. And so the only way to help himself, or the only way to make any sort of argument, is to turn everything into a cultural clash, right? So he's not trying to win the argument on the way Obama would have, or even George Bush would have, by saying, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to fix this, we're going to come together, because he's incapable of that. So what he does is, masks are for pussies, basically, and take this zinc, silver water, and you're going to be fine. It's witch doctorism. It's not politics or presidency.
Imagine just the ideology that contracting a virus is a province for weak people. Imagine someone has cancer, a leukemia, and you just walk up to them like, you're a real pussy. Like what? Like it's a weird ideology to think that there's some kind of toughness involved. Speaking of toughness, you mentioned Obama. This weekend we heard from him with this, commencement this past weekend. So he's out, and then he, made basically insulted this president. And a lot of people are speculating it's because the president has shown no leadership on COVID-19, and specifically it's disproportionately affecting people of color, and he wants to, say something about that. But Obama has also been, quiet because you're not supposed to talk about your predecessor out of respect. Bush didn't say anything about him, and he wanted to kind of recreate that. This is a different situation. And most importantly, President Obama knows that if he says anything, it's going to give Trump something to create a wedge, to be a punching bag. Yet he said something. What do you think of President Obama and his light criticism over this past weekend and moving forward? How is he going to handle criticizing Trump? John?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd like to hear more from Obama, frankly. I think you recall a couple of days before the Trump administration, and some of those connected were saying that there was no pandemic response plan left for the Trump administration when they came in. So I think, both Obama and sort of former Obama officials stepped in to say, actually, here it is, provided you the documentation, this is what we left you. So I think there is a need for officials to speak out. And if there's one, if anyone believes that Donald Trump, if he's out of office, is not going to be critical, and though he shouldn't be the role model for how an ex-president should act, I think we've entered into a different political sphere. And so I think you're going to see a much more active Obama, who, when he left office, was popular, helped lead the country out of the 2008 recession. Trump was lucky enough to catch the coattails of the Obama-Biden economic policy. Not great. Obama often said that, obviously, despite creating tens of millions of jobs, there were still others that were left out of it, which I think is kind of the right approach.
All right, so I just had a little technical issue, but I got the boys back. And John, you were just finishing your answer about Obama and whether or not, he should be out there criticizing Trump. Sorry about that.
Yeah, well, I also think that there's an effort by Trump to both in terms of the Russia investigation, Mike Flynn, to use Obama as a scapegoat. And we see this over and over again. It's not going to work, but it's an effort by Trump to distract from the failed coronavirus response. And I think You're seeing this in a number of spaces. It doesn't help, of course, that the president keeps firing every inspector general that's responsible for either oversight of the coronavirus response or his foreign policy activities, including this week at the State Department. So he keeps, while he's trying to create some credibility and some headwind with these ridiculous claims, conspiracy claims, it doesn't really go anywhere because he keeps on contradicting himself and doing things that show type of criminal activity that got him into the Russiagate.
Yeah. So, John, just one quick question on the firing of the State Department Inspector General. What about that? What was that about? Because first we heard that Secretary Pompeo, had people walking his dogs and something, and then I heard some reporting about that the Inspector General was looking into a Saudi arms deal. What do you know about that Inspector General firing at the State Department?
My guess is that it's the latter issue. You typically wouldn't see, I think, even in these circumstances, the first rumor about a dog walker or that type of support. I mean, the Secretary of State shouldn't be asking the person on their staff to be doing that type of a thing. But I can see on the latter half, it makes a lot of sense given the administration's efforts to bend over backwards for the Saudi crown prince, and also the emphasis that the president has placed on selling weapons diplomacy, which is as long as you buy weapons from the United States, you're okay. And so, it doesn't matter if you commit human rights abuses or murder, a Washington Post reporter, or, you carry out these types of human rights violations, you're going to get your weapons. And that's how we're going to measure the relationship. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's something that relates to this, but I don't know what's happened in this case. But it's disturbing that the administration would go to the depth that it did to remove an inspector general in the middle of an investigation. And so I don't know. Does it sound like somebody is innocent or guilty when they remove somebody from that position in the middle of an investigation? Right. I don't know. That sends a signal.
What's your take on the Inspector General firings, Bill?
I think it's clearly about the Saudi issue. And, one of the things that Trump did, which I think is amazing, is that Pompeo's people tried to make it that, this was just sort of a thing that happened because the White House wanted to put a Trump appointee in because the previous IG was an Obama appointee. But then Trump himself, as soon as he got in front of a camera, was like, Mike Pompeo didn't want this guy around, so I got rid of him. So it's like the gang that couldn't shoot straight. Like if these guys were a small time mob family in Piscataway, New Jersey, they would have all been in fucking jail 50 years ago. But because they're in politics, they get away with it. And right now they're getting away with it. But there's going to be a reckoning down the road. And I think a lot of people that are riding high right now or think they are, this is exactly the sort of thing that comes back to burn you 2 years after you leave the White House.
Why? You're so sure of a reckoning?
I am sure of a reckoning because I think that after the Bush administration was over and the Obama administration came in, they kind of said, you know what, we're going to draw a line. We're going to move forward. Everyone's figured out it's really bad and stupid, even the Bush guys, to do this kind of thing, torture, etc. Well, it turns out that was not, saying, okay, you messed up, let's move on, didn't stop anybody. And I think that any Democratic administration that comes in this time around is going to politically have to track down and defenestrate or what was it, lustration, John? Is that what they called it? Letting light in. Yeah. In Eastern Europe, you're going to have to do that. Otherwise, you really are creating a situation where what's the difference if you vote for either party? So Democrats, literally, it's in their interests and in the country's interest to uproot what's going on here, like that stump in your backyard.
Yes, I'm burning the stump in my backyard every other week. Every week I light a fire, and apparently that's a metaphor for my life. So let me ask you both about the politics, the polling, Joe Biden. I keep seeing articles. The Republicans are getting nervous because Trump's insane behavior and inability to handle the pandemic is really damaging their own political prospects. But then I also hear, and see these polls that say that Trump is leading in swing states where it matters. So, John, what do you think about what is happening right now on the map and what's important?
Yeah, I think 5 months out, trying to be the crystal ball for an election day that's several months away is really hard. Yeah. This election's already had. I don't call it a black swan. It's a white swan for Trump because he knew. The pandemic was there, could have responded to it, didn't respond, didn't plan. And, the economy is where it is right now. And no matter how hard he tries to place the blame on others, a lot of the response and how it has gone rests on his shoulders.
Well, the black swan left a pandemic plan for the white swan and he threw it out. So
well said, Pete. Bill, you couldn't say it like that, even if you tried. So I think that I do think one thing that Trump I think he's like shooting for the moon, if you know that terminology when you play. I think it's hearts. He is banking on some sort of an economic recovery, or at least in the end of the day that his argument about his scapegoating argument about I was the guy who wanted to open the economy all along. It was me. You saw me. I fought for you. And it was these other guys that wanted to keep it closed. And that's why you're in the position you are today. And I really think that he, sort of looking at numbers too, he thinks that he can keep hammering away at that issue. And in the end of the day, he'll be the guy who will bring the economy back. He'll keep your jobs. And I think he's banking on that. I don't think it's going to be a winning argument for him because I think the numbers are extraordinary. With tens of millions of people unemployed, unlikely that it's going to come back in the way that it did before. His polling number in suburban districts doesn't look good. The 2018 elections, I think, was a real indicator of how well Trump is going to do in certain spaces. And I think those numbers have remained where they've remained. This is for the last couple of years. So there's nothing I can conceive of that would bolster him. But this is a 5-month contest, and there's multiple things that are going to happen.
Yeah. I don't love talking about the horse race for too long, but for a minute or two here, I don't mind just to see where we're at now. What do you think, Bill? Same question in terms of November, the horse race. Obviously, we're 5 months away. John makes a good point about that. So much can happen between now and then. I actually think it's a fairly effective strategy for Trump to say, they're the ones that wouldn't let you open up and let you make money. I wanted to. You can't prove that. It's hard to prove a negative, and in politics, it resonates more than marital fights, I think.
Sure. Well, I think that one thing you have to look at is that, as Harry Anton on CNN pointed out the other day, Biden has the longest running, largest lead over an incumbent by any challenger since they've been measuring it. Yes, these numbers are out there. Nobody pays attention. These are aggregate numbers, by the way. You should avoid giving a flying shit about one single Gallup poll or one single CNN poll. My son just yelled, "Dad!" I heard you say that. He's getting mad at me for cursing.
He doesn't like your point, or that you're cursed?
I think he just doesn't like it when I speak, period. But
what does he think? I want to hear what Finn thinks about it.
He's actually, we're in map week here at homeschooling, so he's up hanging a huge map in our hallway, and I don't want to break his concentration. But
wow, you guys take it seriously. We just burnt a map and the
he's not the
fire.
brightest kid, so I don't want to make it hard on him.
Stop that nonsense.
But the issue is that Biden is doing rather well. The polling in an aggregate shows that. And so I think there's a mismatch here that everyone in their heads is still running the 2016 election. Everyone's still fighting the last battle. And I think Trump in particular is doing that. Trump is thinking, all I've got to do is get out my base. I get all the meth heads and the ex-suburbanite construction guys and, the people who hate brown people out to vote, and I'll win again. And I think that's a huge mistake on his part. And I think, though, that the media and everyone else kind of falls in line with that story because they always do. Hillary Clinton, by the way, was running the 2012 election against Trump, and it's the same mistake. And I think that Biden seems to me to be the one guy who has his campaign, I should say, seems to be the one organization that seems to have kind of figured it out. Biden is getting good press. He's not getting a lot of it, which, by the way, why would you want to get a lot of press when the president is shooting himself in the foot, right? But the Tara Reade story and in various other ways, Biden's people seem very good at accentuating his positives and lowering his negatives. And I think that, so I would say that, yes, it's 5 months away, but I think you've got a fairly effective Democratic campaign. And I think you've got a Republican campaign that is run by a guy who hasn't thought of a new idea in 30 years.
Well, even though we're 5 months away and it's hard to make predictions, it would seem that the economy is going to be in a major disarray, cratering between now and then, with no opportunity in terms of I've seen from economic predictions or economists across the board to bounce back. And so that's going to matter. And speaking of which, how are things in D.C., John? Bill was telling me it seems like things are starting to open back up, and you guys are going to, I guess, go through phase one at the beginning of June. What's your read on where you live now? Yeah. And
people are still doing the right thing on social distancing, still wearing the mask. People are respecting, the health and well-being of others. Of course, kids are going crazy. DC schools end on the 29th. No summer camp, so everybody's got to figure out what to do.
Dear God.
And so, I think, trying to support our local businesses, particularly the restaurants close by. And I think there's a good community trying to do that. Let's do it respectfully and smartly. And so I think we have a good mayor in the city. Mayor Bowser, I think, is doing a good job. And I think people are trying to make certain that we do the right thing. Even though we're, Bill and I are both like 2 miles from the White House, it's a different story when you're out in D.C. compared to the rhetoric coming out of the White House. So it's a strange world being so close to Trump, but being so far away in terms of approach.
Bill, did you notice Katz cough?
It did notice that. Yeah. Good job, buddy.
Oh, we had proper distance in FaceTime. Isn't it how an itch in the throat takes a completely different pass now? So what do you think about, Bill, same thing in terms of like DC? I mean, DC, by the way, DC is not a lot of other towns and cities that we're seeing this crazy. I mean, did you guys see that video from that Long Island newscaster that Trump retweeted?
it seemed like an over-the-top movie script where everybody was just going off on this guy. It's one of these local newscasters. They're calling him fake news and losing their mind, and Trump is calling them good people. Like, there's Long Island for you. That's how I see Long Island, by the way, myself. Yeah. But I mean, what about that, guys? And I'll leave you alone after that. But how bad was it, that video and the behavior and the fact that the president of the United States shared it more than once and talked about how those were good people? Well,
it's sort of what I said before, Pete. You know, if you're an incompetent fool, then all you have to work with is people's bitterness and anger or their political beliefs. Right. You know, and you know, those people, by the way, don't represent very many Americans, even in red states. I mean, it's like 80% of Americans. But
their behavior is so outrageous, it makes you feel like that must be a lot of people. But there can't be that many people that act.
Yeah, the polling doesn't support that there are. I mean, I think it's 80 or 81% of Americans want people to maintain social distancing. It's 8 out of 10. That's pretty good. I mean, there's more racists in America than there are people who want to like break out and, you know, get drunk with 500 people they don't know. I mean, you know, I think that the media loves those stories. And, you know, you see these shots of New York or the mall in Washington where somebody with a zoom lens shoots it at a camera and it makes it look incredibly crowded. I was on the edge of one of those viral photos that was on Twitter. My wife and my kid were at the mall. We're not in the frame, but I know where that shot was taken. And I was there that day. There was 50 feet between almost everybody on that mall. And everyone literally looks like they're snogging each other. It's ridiculous because the zoom camera makes it look crowded. So I think the media loves those stories. They love it to flip out about that stuff. But the majority of people, often to their own great economic detriment, are doing the right thing. But you know, that's not going to lead on CNN, right? That's the most boring story in the world.
Yeah, but you say that, and it's so easy to blame, you know, the kind of mainstream corporate media loving those stories, but so do I, dude, in terms of social media. Like, in terms of social media is a lot more of representative of what we like. Is it? And we're garbage people. Yes, we love these stories. That's why they sell them to us. Yeah, everybody's clicking on that video of those assholes yelling. I watched it 3 times.
Go ahead, John.
Had you seen the recent videos of Bill and his kittens? I mean, that's really where you should be going.
I'd watch those, but I'd be more likely to watch him if he's cursing them out and fighting them.
Nice.
Than if they were just being cute.
On Trump, like, I hate to acknowledge when Bill is right about something.
Yeah, I do too.
Hold on, I gotta write this down.
It's being recorded.
This is when Bill talks about Trump going back to the same base of people that won. Yeah. This is the base that he's going back to. He is stuck. I'll give him one thing. He sticks to a strategy, and the strategy is sort of this particular group, and so that's why he's out there supporting it. He's got to. You know, I don't think he's going to lose their support no matter what, but he believes by getting them out there, riling them up, creating dissidents in capitals like Wisconsin or Michigan, that somehow you're going to change the political dynamics in such a way that move in his favor. And he keeps doing it over and over again. He's a one trick pony and going after these same people. There you have it, Bill. I just agree with you on something. So
I've got a tear.
Put that in your stump, Pete.
Put that in your stump and smoke it. I got to go start another fire out back. Bill Boyle, John Katz, Boyle and Katz, Backyard Politics. Thank you guys both for joining me. I really appreciate it, as always.
Thanks again, Pete. Bye, Bill.
All right, guys.
Bye.
There you go. Katz and Boyle. Boyle and Katz, Backyard Politics. Like getting those two guys together. A lot of people say that their favorite segment we ever did on Stand Up with Pete Dominick at SiriusXM was with John Avlon and Will Cain, because we all had such different opinions on things. I do want to get back to something like that. I don't think I'll ever get that trio back together, because I think Will has just gotten away from commenting publicly about politics. He's doing so good with his sports show on ESPN radio. But I would like to find that chemistry and capture it again and get a guy on the right, a center, and the left, and try to do that again. So thanks for the feedback. People always bring that one up to me, those longtime listeners. All right, well, I don't want to alienate all the new listeners and all of the new subscribers. Thank you very much. So many new people signing up this week. and we are continuing to grow. Despite the fact that people are losing work and worrying about money, people continuing to subscribe and even paying more for the podcast, which I'm putting everything I got into each and every day of the week. With all of your feedback, with all of your input, it feels like the listeners are part owners and producers of the show. I've never felt more connected to the audience, and it's so much fun to watch it grow and to connect you with each other as well, looking for new ways to do that and new features for the show. It's going to constantly develop. It's not going to be static. It's not going to stagnate. And that's partly due to your great ideas. So keep them coming. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Be good, be safe, be kind, stay connected, stay close. You're not alone. The shit you're dealing with, you are not alone. I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.